Taking a slowpoke like you on a honeymoon wouldn't be any fun, would it? That's why I left you behind. Traveling with Mom is hundreds of times more enjoyable. I was dumbfounded by the words coming from my husband over the phone. I had been looking forward to our honeymoon, but next to him wasn't me, it was his mother. Sorry, dear. Could you just stay home this time? Don't worry, we'll have fun. The cheerful voice of his mother could be heard faintly through the phone. I never imagined he would go on a trip with his mother and leave me at home. Collapsing under the weight of a situation I had never considered. Tears I had been holding back streamed down my cheeks. Along with the sadness, a boiling anger surged up from within. I couldn't forgive him. I was going to make him regret this. I immediately left the house and headed somewhere. They can enjoy their trip for now. They have no idea how costly their betrayal will be. I am Kelly. I work as an administrative assistant at the metropolitan branch of a major corporation, Company A. My husband, Mike, is a salesman at the same branch. He's a kind man with a refreshing smile, and we hit it off quickly. Before we knew it, we were drawn to each other and got married after a company romance. We've been married for a year. We had our wedding, but we haven't gone on our honeymoon yet. We spent a lot on the wedding, so let's save up a bit more before we go on our honeymoon. I'm also worried about leaving Mom alone, but I promise we'll go, so please wait, he said. My mother-in-law has been living alone since my father-in-law passed away, a year before our wedding. Our condo was close to my in-laws' house, and since his father's death, my husband frequently checked on his mother. Though a year had passed since she started living alone, I understood my husband's concern for his mother, a family member. My mother-in-law hasn't been very welcoming to me since we first met, and I'm honestly grateful that my husband actively checks on her. Plus, it's true we spent a lot on the wedding. I agreed with my husband's idea, looking forward to our honeymoon while we saved up. Half a year into our marriage, Mike was promoted to work at the headquarters in the city. That marked the beginning of his increased workload. He would leave early in the morning and come back right before I went to bed. He often spent weekends sleeping off the week's fatigue. Even though we had saved enough for our honeymoon, his busy schedule seemed to push it further away. Whether it was the stress of work or the life stage of being married, his personality began to change after our marriage. He used to be kind and always smiling, but now his expressions were unchanging, and his attitude towards me was cold. He used to be understanding when I came home late from work, but now he would coldly say, "Why isn't dinner ready?" or "The laundry isn't folded." Mom used to fold it every day. His behavior worsened after he started working at the headquarters. Each cold remark made me sad, and though I acted fine at work, my colleagues worried about my lack of energy. I know being busy can make someone irritable. There were days when his thoughtless comments upset me, but I told myself it was just a phase for him. I never talked back about his cold attitude, deciding to wait patiently until his busy period was over. Despite these emotional distances, his hard work paid off financially, and at his suggestion, we took out a loan and bought a new house. It was the home of our dreams. Far from his mother's house. When I asked if it was okay to move so far, he reassured me with a smile. Seeing his smile made me worry less about his mother, and the possibility of our honeymoon seemed brighter. The new house was closer to the headquarters, making his commute easier. My commute got longer, but if it lessened his burden, I didn't mind. Though we had taken on a large debt with the loan, we were ready to start our new life. But then we faced a significant problem. Isn't this a wonderful house? It's exciting to have a new home at this age. My mother-in-law was at our new house. I was dumbfounded. Why is my mother-in-law here? I couldn't quite grasp what she meant by new house at her age. Why? I asked, confused, as she was putting up flashy patterned curtains without asking. Why? Well, that's not a nice way to talk, dear. It's such a big house, it'd be a waste for just the two of you, right? I'll live here too. Besides, living together means I can be close to Mike. She answered with a smile. I was speechless at her cheerful response. Looking closer, I noticed belongings not from our condo mixed in. They were her things, brought over from her own home. Was she really planning to live here? I broke into a cold sweat facing this unexpected situation. I pulled my husband aside to confront him. I never heard anything about living with your mother. Why would you decide this without asking me? Mom's alone now, and it's more convenient than going back and forth to her place. Don't tell me, Kelly, you don't want to live with my mom? She's family now, just like you. That is. I couldn't argue back when he put it that way, even though I wasn't keen on the idea. Now I understood what he meant by being okay with moving away from his parents' house. The discussions for living together had been happening behind my back. What hurt the most was not being consulted about it. And so, our life as three began. Mike was as busy as ever, often not coming home on weekdays. I ended up spending more time with my mother-in-law. She monitored every aspect of my housekeeping, delivering daily doses of sarcasm. Kelly, you should quit your job and focus on housework. It's so neglected I can't stand it. This way, Mike can't properly relax at home. If the laundry wasn't perfectly folded, she made me redo it. If there was a speck of dust left, I'd get an earful. Even after returning from work, if the housework wasn't up to her standards, she demanded I do it over again. She didn't work or do any housework herself, just criticized. A minor displeasure would prompt her to say things like, "You're such a terrible housekeeper for a wife," but Mike never stood up for me. He blamed me, saying, "It's your fault for being clumsy." I considered quitting my job to dedicate myself to housekeeping, but Mike insisted, "Don't quit your job. Keep working to contribute a little to our finances." After taking out a loan, Mike became even more sensitive about money. My salary went directly to him as a way to save, and he managed all our finances. I received a small allowance, which had to cover all living expenses. The little money left after that was my actual allowance. There was hardly any money I could spend freely. After a full day of work, I was left to handle all the housework alone. The constant criticism from both my husband and mother-in-law nearly brought me to tears. By the time everything was done, it was late, and I was exhausted. Occasionally, my parents or grandfather, who lived with them, would call. I'd put on a brave face, not wanting to worry them. Especially my grandfather's caring voice made me nearly confess how hard it was, but I didn't want to add to their worries, being newly married. I managed to say, "I'm managing all right, despite the challenges." I hoped that if I kept up my hard work at both my job and home, they would eventually recognize my efforts. Even with my mother-in-law's sarcasm and my husband's cold glances, I spared no effort to balance work and housekeeping. During the whirlwind of busy days, months passed by quickly. Then, during dinner with the three of us, Mike said, "Let's go on a honeymoon." Huh! I was surprised by the sudden mention of a honeymoon. Something I thought I'd never hear from him again. My mother-in-law smiled at me. "You haven't had your honeymoon yet. Have fun." Her tone was different from her usual nagging, more like a mother sending off her daughter. Mike, who had been stern for so long, now looked softer. "It's our honeymoon, after all. Let's enjoy it to the fullest." How long had it been since I heard such kindness in his voice? I was genuinely happy that he remembered and valued our honeymoon. Both my husband, Mike, and my mother-in-law must have recognized all the hard work I had put in until now. I finally felt rewarded. Mike, who had been unhelpful with household chores until now, took the initiative to book the tickets and hotel. Our destination was abroad. Getting my passport for the first time, all that was left was to pack and wait eagerly for the day of the trip. Staring at mine and Mike's passports on the table numerous times a day, I daydreamed about our long-awaited honeymoon. Then came the day of our honeymoon. Waking up in the morning, an eerie silence greeted me. "Mike!" My husband, who was supposed to be sleeping next to me, was nowhere to be found. Thinking he might have woken up earlier, I looked for him all over the house but couldn't find him anywhere. I thought I might have gotten the date wrong, but it was definitely the day of our trip. My mother-in-law, who was always at home, was also missing. Trying to call Mike and my mother-in-law, I couldn't get through to either. After hanging up, I noticed that Mike's luggage, which had been in the living room corner until yesterday, and the passports on the table, were missing, except for mine. In my mother-in-law's room, there were several hangers without clothes on them, and the atmosphere felt different than usual. What was this situation? On the day of our trip, an unprecedented anxiety sent my heart racing. A horrible suspicion crossed my mind. Could they have gone on the trip without me? But I immediately dismissed the thought. It seemed too cruel, even for them. This was our honeymoon we had waited a year for. However, eventually, the flight time passed without any contact from them, leaving me in a confused state for the rest of the day. After repeatedly trying to call them, I finally got through the next day at noon.
Finally, you answered. Where are you? I've been so worried. You haven't been answering your phone.
I blurted out loudly, overwhelmed, only for Mike to respond with a cheerful voice. Now? We're on an island down south. With Mom.
Huh?
My mind went blank at Mike's words. The southern island was the planned destination for our honeymoon. And he was there with his mother. My worst fears had been confirmed.
Why? It was supposed to be our honeymoon, wasn't it?
Go on a honeymoon with you? As if. Taking a slowpoke who can't even do household chores like you wouldn't be any fun. That's why we left you behind. It's hundreds of times more fun with Mom. I was dumbfounded by the words coming from Mike over the phone. He had promised to take me on a honeymoon after our wedding. Was the promise he made to me all a lie? Sorry, dear. Mike was just being honest. I've always wanted to visit this country. You just stay home, okay? Don't worry, we'll have fun. I could hear my mother-in-law laughing through the phone. Overwhelmed by the situation, I couldn't respond, and the call abruptly ended. What was all my effort for? Enduring Mike's cold attitude and my mother-in-law's sarcasm, suppressing my own desires, and doing my best at both housework and my job, only to not even be acknowledged. Was I just a joke to them all along? The tears I had been holding back streamed down my face. A boiling anger welled up from within at this terrible betrayal. Feelings I had kept bottled up seemed to burst forth all at once. I couldn't forgive them. I was going to make sure they regretted this. Immediately grabbing the suitcase I had prepared, I opted for the train instead of a plane and headed back to my parents' house. My grandfather was there, and he welcomed me warmly, surprised by my unusual demeanor and the streaks of tears. I confided everything about my married life and this honeymoon incident. My grandfather listened intently and eventually nodded solemnly. All right. Leave it to me, he declared with determination. The next day, as Mike and my mother-in-law were enjoying the top-tier suite, the hotel manager visited them. I'm terribly sorry for the inconvenience, but due to circumstances at our hotel, the CEO of Company A will be staying, and we need you to vacate this room. Surprised by the sudden request to leave, Mike reacted to the mention of Company A's CEO. Company A is where my husband and I work.
Huh? Why would our CEO suddenly? And why would they ask us to leave the room? That's absurd. Yeah, even if he is the CEO, we were here first. It's unacceptable to disrupt us like this.
Despite being urged to leave, my husband and mother-in-law refused. Then, a call came through to my husband, causing him confusion. The caller ID showed my name. Annoyed, my husband ignored the call several times, but eventually answered due to the persistent ringing.
Kelly, don't call me at a time like this. That's why you're such a drag and slowpoke.
I've heard all about it from Kelly. Sounds like you've been quite the guest at her home.
What? The CEO?
My husband's voice shrunk in surprise.
Why would the CEO be on Kelly's phone?
I'm Kelly's grandfather. Well, her maternal grandfather. You didn't realize, did you?
The CEO is Kelly's grandfather.
My grandfather was indeed my maternal grandfather. He hadn't been able to attend our wedding due to unavoidable circumstances. And my husband was unaware that my grandfather is the CEO of Company A. The hotel where my husband and mother-in-law were staying has deep ties with Company A, and they were able to book the suite thanks to a priority arrangement with the company. To make up for the inconvenience caused by their ejection, my grandfather offered to cover the hotel's losses out of his own pocket, insisting they vacate the suite.
Considering I promoted you based on your work reputation, to think you'd go on a honeymoon without your wife and with your mother instead. What were you thinking?
My grandfather roared at my husband, who trembled in fear.
I'm terribly sorry. Excuses won't do. Get back here, you fool.
My grandfather demanded, unforgiving. My husband had no room to argue. Standing next to my grandfather, I calmly took the phone from him and told my husband clearly. Mike, I intend to divorce you.
Divorce? Wait, Kelly.
His voice shook with agitation. I hung up without mercy, holding the fully filled-out divorce papers in my hand. Meanwhile, my husband and mother-in-law, who had hurriedly taken a flight, were arguing disgracefully on the plane.
It's your fault, isn't it? Saying Kelly didn't need to come on the trip. It's all because of you, Mom. Don't blame me. You were the one who agreed with it, Mike. Shut up. Don't talk to me right now.
Their quarrel bothered other passengers, and they were admonished by the flight attendants. Blaming each other, they returned home to find my grandfather and me waiting in the new house. Despite their festive attire, their faces had aged significantly in just a few days.
Welcome back. Could you sign the divorce papers right away?
I showed the green papers to my husband, offering him a pen. He hesitated, making an uncomfortable face, and looked fearfully at my grandfather sitting next to me.
I deeply apologize for this trip.
You're apologizing to the wrong person first, aren't you, Mike? My grandfather sternly corrected my husband's attempt to apologize first to him. Intimidated by my grandfather's presence, my husband turned to face me again, but couldn't meet my eyes.
Kelly,
I'm not looking for an apology. Just sign it. I interrupted him without hearing his apology. Under my grandfather's watchful eye, my husband begrudgingly signed the divorce papers. My mother-in-law couldn't say anything snide to me and silently watched my husband sign. This was the end of my relationship with my husband and mother-in-law. As my husband finished signing, my grandfather spoke up.
Is that all the apology we're getting, Mike? What?
I looked at my grandfather, curious about what he would say next. What he revealed was shocking.
You've been having an affair with a female employee at the company, haven't you?
I was speechless, not having noticed my husband's affair. My grandfather explained that he had been covertly keeping an eye on me through his visits to various branches. Concerned about my dwindling spirits after marriage, he hired a detective to follow my husband, uncovering the affair. Photos laid on the table showed my husband entering a hotel with another woman. The reason my husband wasn't coming home until late or at all was because he was having an affair. Despite forcing me to work, he freely spent money and even had an affair, leaving me dumbfounded and speechless.
It's truly unfortunate. We can't have someone like you in the main office. Prepare yourself for the consequences. I'm so sorry. Please, anything but a demotion.
My husband begged. Then, turning to me with tears streaming down his face, he apologized again.
Kelly, I'm really sorry. I apologize for everything up to now. Please, say something to the CEO. I did my best at work, didn't I?
Mike never acknowledged my efforts, did he? Why should I acknowledge Mike's hard work when he's been unfaithful at the company? If you're so close to your mother that you'd go on a honeymoon with her, why don't you ask her to sort it out?
No way!
I had no intention of listening to his request now. As my husband was wallowing in despair, my mother-in-law began to apologize.
I'm so sorry for what my foolish son has done. He will never do such a thing again, so please don't abandon my son.
She begged earnestly. After watching them with a cold gaze, I firmly told my husband and mother-in-law. You were the first to abandon, weren't you? I will not listen to your requests. Please do not involve me in your lives ever again. My mother-in-law turned pale. My grandfather, with a stern look, nodded and stood up from the sofa. Leaving my husband and mother-in-law in the new house, the curtain finally closed on this chapter. Afterward, my husband was demoted to a subsidiary company, placed near a window as a mere figurehead. His salary significantly decreased, making it impossible to properly pay off our new house's mortgage. Rumors of his affair had already spread throughout the subsidiary, and he was treated like an outcast by the employees. Once an elite employee of the headquarters, my husband couldn't fit in at the new workplace due to rumors and his pride, leading to constant arguments with his boss and eventually being forced to resign. My mother-in-law, living with my husband, started working part-time to contribute a little to the household. Struggling in her first job and having all the household chores I used to do dumped on her. If she failed, my husband scolded her, and she would retaliate, leading to endless arguments at home. Meanwhile, I continued to work hard as I always did. Years after that incident, I met a wonderful man at a new job location, and we decided to get married. We enjoyed our honeymoon after the wedding, and his family warmly welcomed me, leading to happy days filled with smiles every day.